And welcome back, Professor Almeida, jpalmeida.com. Welcome back, folks. This is another lecture in my series of critical thinking lectures. And today we're going to talk about arguments. I'm going to split this video in two. So this is part one. The reason why I want to split this into two is because this lecture might get a bit lengthy, and I want to make sure that you are able to get through each video on your own time. As before, if you need to, you can scrub through this video. You can stop at any time. That's the beauty of online video. This particular lecture coincides with Chapter 1 of Introduction to Logic and Critical Thinking. It is an OER textbook. And if you are in my COSA 2 class, if you go to Canvas and locate the OER module, you will find that textbook and you can download it as a PDF. Also, with the reading, you might find, depending on your level of experience, that you may have to go back and reread in order to understand the key terms and concepts. The reading can be a bit challenging, especially if you have never been introduced to philosophy and critical thinking before. So with that said, it is my hope that this lecture will make more sense of the reading. Also, programming note, keep in mind that there are going to be some things in this lecture that don't necessarily coincide with what's in the book and vice versa. So again, my goal here is to help you get through the reading. And with that said, let's begin by talking about recognizing arguments. But before we can get into arguments, we need to go over a couple of key terms, particularly what a statement is, what a premise is, what a conclusion is, and finally the argument itself. Now, what is a statement? A statement can be a sentence or an utterance that can be viewed as either true or false. So, for example, I'm sitting in my office here. I can say the walls are white, right? That is a statement. The death penalty is morally wrong. Regardless of where you stand on that, that is a statement. And we'll get into statements being arguments and all of that good stuff. Finally, I could say that The Matrix is a better movie than the Titanic. That is a statement I am making. Now, there are some sentences or utterances that don't necessarily qualify as statements. So, for example, hey, what time is it? Is that a statement? Oh my goodness! Is that a statement? Right? So, let's look at some examples. Okay, so I've mentioned a couple of examples already. Red is a color. That is a physical statement. Abortion is morally wrong. That is a moral statement. The Matrix is a better movie than Titanic. That's an evaluative statement. Here are some non-examples. What time is it? You're asking a question in this instance. Oh my goodness. That is an exclamation. Close the window. That's actually a command. Okay, so you're probably sitting here thinking to yourself, well, what's the difference? How do I know if a sentence is a statement? What qualifies as a statement? And here's the test that you can perform. You need to ask yourself, does it make sense to put, is it true that, or is it false that, in front of it? And if it does make sense, then you have a statement. So looking at our examples here, is it true that The Matrix is a better movie than the Titanic? Titanic. That's what I meant to say. So you have a statement, right? Because it makes sense to ask, is it true that The Matrix is a better movie than Titanic? Is it true that the walls are white in your office? Is it true that the death penalty is morally wrong? Okay, now you know you have statements. Is it true that close the window? That doesn't make sense, doesn't it? So close the window is therefore not a statement because it doesn't make sense. Okay, so hopefully this is making some sense to you, and if it does, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. So again, our statement test, is it true that, what time is it? Well, that doesn't make sense. Is it true that close the window? Doesn't make sense. Is it true that, oh my goodness? Doesn't make sense. Is it true that red is a color? Well, that makes sense. So therefore, it's a statement. Now, we have to watch out for some tricky statements. And there are two examples here. The first is the ought imperative, which is a statement, or excuse me, a sentence that has the form of a command, but is a statement about what ought to be done. So for example, do X. Do X really means you should do X. Don't blow dry your hair in the tub really means you should not blow dry your hair in the tub. Here's another example of a tricky statement in the form of a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a sentence that has the grammatical form of a question but is meant to be understood as a statement. So for example, you walk up to a smoker and you ask this question. Don't you know smoking will kill you? What are you really trying to say to that person? Right? You're asking a question. Don't you know smoking will kill you? What is the statement you are really trying to make? So take a couple of moments. Find out what that statement is. Okay, so you've thought about this. Don't you know smoking will kill you? What is the actual statement here? The actual statement is smoking will kill you. That's what you're really trying to tell the person, but you're framing it as a question. How about this? You've probably asked some people in your life this question. How am I supposed to do that? Right? Somebody comes to you and says, hey, could you go into the storage room? There's a crate you need to take out. And in that crate, there are a couple of boxes. Can you open up the boxes and assemble those pieces together? How am I supposed to do that? What are you really saying? What you're really saying here is, I can't do that. That's your statement. Okay, so you need to be careful with statements that are framed as questions. Those are rhetorical questions, right? Now, I have a couple of other examples for you here. Let's look at two statements in a sentence. Roses are red and violets are blue. What are the two statements in this sentence? Did you come up with these? So statement one, roses are red. Statement two, violets are blue. Here's another example. You cannot step twice in the same river, for other waters are ever flowing onto you. What are the two statements in this sentence? Statement one, you cannot step twice in the same river. And statement two, other waters are ever flowing onto you. Okay, so hopefully you now understand what statements are. This makes more sense to you. Again, if this video does help you, hit that like and subscribe button and I will keep making more of these. So let's move on to analyzing arguments. And again, we need to go over a couple of key terms here. The first key term that we need to look at is the argument itself. An argument is a group of statements, one or more of which are intended to prove or support another statement, right? So that is an argument. Now, usually you're going to make an argument. For example, you are going to state that The Matrix is a better movie than Titanic. So that statement is your argument, and you're going to have to back that argument up, right? And you do so by offering evidence. A premise is a statement, an argument offered as evidence or reasons why you should accept another statement. Another way of looking at this is you are trying to persuade your audience, whoever that audience is, that The Matrix really is a better movie than Titanic. And to do so, you're going to offer up statements as evidence as to why The Matrix is a better movie than Titanic. You also have the conclusion, which is the statement, the premises, support, proves, or asserts. Okay, here are two other key terms you need to be aware of. You need to be careful with assumptions, right? You need to be careful with assumptions. With assumptions, you are assuming that something is true. You're making a statement that is taken for granted. For example, I'm surprised he didn't show up today. I thought he was coming. So when you make the statement that you are surprised that he didn't show up today, you made the assumption that he was going to show up. I'm telling you our arrival time on the assumption that you will check to see whether or not our flight is on time before you come to the airport. Okay, so this person is telling you their arrival time, assuming that you come to the airport. Okay, so it's being taken for granted. Does this make sense? Here's another key term, implication. With an implication, it's not stated, but it offers possible outcomes of the premise. For example, without stating that it's going to rain, you make a statement such as, we should take our umbrellas with us today. Okay, what is that statement implying? By stating that you should take your umbrellas with you, you're implying that it's going to rain. You're not saying that it's going to rain, you're offering it as an implication. I hope this makes some sense. Okay, I'm going to skip through these slides. I'm borrowing these slides from a colleague in order to make this video because, again, with the reading, it can be a little bit challenging, and if you see another source, hopefully that reading will make some sense to you. Now, we need to look at evidence. And to do so, we need to first look at arguments themselves. And there are three elements common to most arguments. There's a claim, there's a support, and there's a warrant. Let's take one at a time here. The claim is the thesis or the central idea of the argument. For example, The Matrix is a better movie than Titanic. This claim is either proposed or defended. It's an assertion or a declarative statement. Now, here are a couple of examples of claims. You have claims of fact, which is truth that requires research to be substantiated. You have claims of value, which is acceptance or denial based on morality. And finally, claims of policy, which asserts a protocol should be adopted. Now, to back up that claim, you need support. Support is the evidence presented, and this can include details, examples, statistics. So if you're going to claim or argue that The Matrix is a better movie than Titanic, you are going to offer up examples, perhaps other statements related to the acting, to the storyline, to special effects, etc., etc. Okay, the evidence provides the grounds for the claim, if you will. Finally, you have the warrant, which is the bridge that connects the claim and the supporting evidence. This bridge shows how the data or the reasons supporting the claim are relevant. You need to understand that warrants can be explicit or implicit. If it's implicit, that means it's unspoken, it's implied, right? We made that example earlier. If you want to imply that it's raining without saying it, you can make a statement saying, hey, we should take our umbrellas with us today. Okay, you're basically implying that it's raining without outright saying it. When a warrant is explicit, on the other hand, you are directly stating it. So again, for example, it's going to rain today, you really should take your umbrella with you. Okay, you're outright saying that it's going to rain. That is being explicit. Okay, so hopefully this makes some sense. Now, finally, in this presentation, you're going to come across these terms in your Chapter 1 reading. Deduction versus induction. So we need to look at the difference between deductive thinking and inductive thinking. So again, this is in your Chapter 1 reading here. With deductive thinking, okay, we're going to make some deductive arguments. Deductive arguments try to prove their conclusions with rigorous, inescapable logic. So remember this example I'm going to give you because you're going to see it again in the second part of this presentation. So for example, you have these two statements. All humans are mortal. Socrates is a human. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Okay, so that's the conclusion we're trying to make. With deductive reasoning, the premises guarantee the truth of a conclusion or claim. So you have these two premises here. All humans are mortal. Socrates is a human. And then you have the conclusion, therefore Socrates is mortal. They are assessed in terms of validity. And we're going to get into that in the second part of this presentation. With inductive arguments, they try to show that the conclusion is plausible, likely or probable, given the premises. Here's an example. So far, every class, the professor has worn a tie. Therefore, next class, the professor will wear a tie. So with inductive reasoning, reason from past instances to make future predictions. Okay, so you're making inferences. So if the truth of premise possibly or probably establishes truth of conclusion, we can then say that the argument is cogent or convincing. So what about you? What kind of reasoning do you find most comfortable, deductive or inductive reasoning, and why? So we're going to go ahead and stop it here, and that will conclude this part of the video, and I'm going to record a separate video getting into part 2. So again, if this helps you out, like or subscribe. I've been doing a couple of takes of this, by the way. So I hope, again, this video helps, and we'll see you in part 2.